So I'm Rebecca Neal. I'm a holistic healthcare practitioner, and it might seem like a weird conversation for me to be a part of as far as emotions and money, but I feel like I kind of can bring a topic to hand that I think kind of is worth having conversation about. And so in alternative healthcare, it tends to be a form of healthcare model that individuals are using as an out-of-pocket expense. And so in a lot of cases, these are not covered expenses that would normally be seen or sought after by, insurance deductibles or anything of that nature. And so that puts a huge emotional burden on individuals that are, wanting to kind of get down to understanding what might be an issue for them as far as their healthcare needs and not really being able to seek that in other options. So for me, I kind of have a perspective where there's a huge emotional factor when people come in to utilize these services. They are not cheap services, but in a lot of cases, it's a priority. It becomes a priority only after a diagnosis, whether it be chronic disease, illness, or otherwise, becomes that factor. And so your healthcare and emotions are extremely an emotional conversation to be had. So, from a perspective for myself, I know and personally have grown up with a lot of people that have dealt with chronic healthcare issues. And over the time, those chronic healthcare issues are a burden not only to themselves, but, family members and individuals. And those out-of-pocket expenses are not things that we typically think of as individuals. It's interesting because in a lot of studies, it shows that there are a lot of individuals that will prioritize, budgeting, and budgeting usually entails people omitting healthcare costs. The first thing to usually be deducted out of budget is actually our food. Our food is the number one thing that is usually considered as shaving off. And I learned over the years, I changed my perspective on that because of just emotional considerations I had with dealing with my own health, my family's health. And it's just an interesting conversation to kind of see when you start really honing in on what people do as far as budgeting and where their healthcare costs come into effect. And unfortunately, it's usually the very last. And that can present some huge issues further on in life. If we start cutting out, most people, it becomes an emotional thing when you say, hey, I have a gym membership, or my budget for my family of 6 is $1,000 a month, and those seem like outrageous numbers or things that nobody would consider. But ultimately, it's those things that if we don't consider them now, where in our health does it become marginally expensive? And so I have a couple statistics that I thought were relatively interesting, quite honestly sad. So for instance, cancer. Cancer forces 42% of patients to exhaust their entire life savings within 2 years. 2 years of a cancer diagnosis, and then 42.4% of those patients deplete their entire life savings, according to published by the American Journal of Medicine. So really, it's just giving perception to these considerations of individuals that have these types of diagnoses. For instance, my mother-in-law is in need of a kidney, for instance. Kidneys are not something that come by. It's really important to be an organ donor, by the way. But and that's a huge emotional thing that an average person wouldn't normally have to think about. Not only the emotional component of having to need a kidney, but like to test to be able to see if you even qualify for that kidney. There's an emotional complex to diagnoses. And in a lot of these cases, these diagnoses are not treatments that can be sought after by conventional medicine. And so that's where the types of therapies I provide would be beneficial. So another study was for households. Sorry. Oh, sorry.
You okay?
Yeah. So, sorry. I have seizures every day. Sorry, that was a little one. I apologize. So a study in U.S. households that was published in January 2016 showed that the higher levels of unemployment were likely to purchase over-the-counter painkillers. And so we notice the effects of the emotional debt we have on society and how this is directly affecting our health. So, I mean, what it's saying is that negative effects of self-esteem and impaired cognitive functioning, meaning that you can't even think about the things that you have to do. You can't remember, you can't be attentive to those priorities that you have. And so just knowing the expenses of the burdens of health, and it's a physical and psychological thing. So one study showed that simply thinking about the prospects of financial insecurity was enough to increase pain. People reported feeling pain twice as much as physical pain after recalling a financially unstable time in their life compared to those who thought of a secure period. A 2016 report from the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta linked debt to higher death rate. Becoming a serious delinquent on debt increased the mortality rate by 5% within the 3 months of a bill became delinquent. But a 100% point increase in a person's credit score led to a 4.38% decline in mortality risks. So, I mean, I could show you study after study, but ultimately, debt's affecting our health. It's burning us. There was a study the other day that was concluding basically individuals that were dealing with financial burden and chronic health care were leading to hopelessness. And that hopelessness has been proven scientifically to literally kill yourselves. You are giving up on life and you will die. That is the effects of it's kind of crazy. So Americans spent $3.3 trillion on healthcare last year, $10,348 per person, and this was up by 18.9% in just 5 years. The U.S. spending in the health was 17.9% of the gross domestic product. So yeah, I feel like just in perspective, just kind of honing in on how our lifestyle, our expenditures towards healthcare can be a huge burden to us. And then understanding on how that science has been proving that continued exhaustion on life, whether it starts with a child that you have that has leukemia. I mean, these are huge emotional thought processes, and to understand that people are literally blowing their life savings in just couples of years for these types of healthcare, it kind of brings an emotional component on how broken is our healthcare system, where is our money being allocated as far as what we're paying. I mean, let's talk about insurance deductibles and how expensive that can be, and really what is it covering, and is this what we've decided is a priority form of coverage. And in hindsight, I guess that's how I look at this conversation is, for me as an individual that seeks to help people that have budgets that really need to be, used, and it's a complex scenario because healthcare is not cheap in any way, shape, or form, and so I think it's about understanding where other people sit and financially, and being really open to giving perspective onto those individuals and really being kind, especially this time of year. Because at the end of the day, you have no idea what people are dealing with, especially when your health is your life. If you don't have your health, you don't have much of anything. And that could be your individual health, it could be your child's health, it could be your spouse, your parents, and that's a huge emotional complex. So yeah, that's my input on this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. What questions do you have for either Mark or Rebecca?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Yes.
Timothy Watley, and so I'll jump on Mark here. Appreciated your insights. I made a little elbow jab at Dave Ramsey, so I'm curious to get a little background there, maybe expand get the emotional thing. I've seen those stories
Yep.
and they are effective. So I can see how the advertising piece works out and how that impacts. And so in terms of him making money, but at the same time, you know, the whole foundational principles, you know, so I was trying to figure out what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, I think specifically when we look at like a Dave Ramsey, for people that are familiar or not, he does what's called the Financial Peace University. It's done a lot through churches, predominantly is where it was done through. I know some of it's outside of that now, but usually most of it's still done through there. And it'll talk about basic budgeting concepts of percentages that should go to different parts of the budget, and having an emergency fund and those types. And all the basics of those is stuff that I teach. I've taught Financial Peace University in the past. I've been involved in those programs. And those foundational principles, I think, are very, very good. It talks about life insurance and debt and all those types of things and what should happen. The problems that come in is that it goes way beyond that. And the money is really made by events. The money is made by radio. The money is made by endorsements. So not to necessarily just nail on him, but this is within that whole realm. There's multiple people that do this. So how you sell those endorsements and how you sell the radio time is by being more fantastic, by having more emotions tied to it. And that's where people get kind of screwed up. They go through like a Financial Peace University and look at the foundations, that's great, but then once they try to apply it to their own lives, they need help. And the way they've done it through some of those programs is say, hey, go to our endorsed providers, and you know, the screening on those endorsed providers aren't exactly what I like to see. So, basically, as long as you're willing to pay, you know, and pay to be on the list, you can be on the list. And there's just kind of some practices on there that are very aggressive that I would not agree with from that standpoint. We can talk on sideline. I would have to be careful of being on something recorded. Just saying. Yeah. So I've had experience on different levels with it, and it's something that I had personal arguments with them on, and didn't necessarily like the approach. So for me, what the foundation of some of these programs is help everybody. Give everyone the time they deserve. Give them personalized advice, no matter how much money they have. And that really is the foundation of what those principles are supposed to be, but the program doesn't support those principles. So what's taught in like a Financial Peace would support that, but outside of that, it really doesn't. That's my issue with it. And then, you know, the radio programs and those types of things, I am confronting that more when I talk to clients that are followers and trying to bring them back to the financial peace side of things. That's the battle.